and that are striving and that want to trade with us. And principal among those are the countries of the Commonwealth. And I'm delighted, therefore, to be able to introduce right now our Commonwealth spokesman, who is doing a tremendous amount of work building those bridges for us. Please give a warm welcome to James Carver MEP.
Good afternoon, Conference. After 19 years membership, I'm delighted to stand in front of you today for my maiden speech at the UKIP Conference. It's taken a bit of time. I want to start by saying thank you to all of the activists who have campaigned so hard over the years and have got us to this vital point of an in-out referendum. I'd like to pay tribute to some of our UKIP colleagues who regrettably are no longer with us. People like Graham Booth, Don Holston, Malcolm Wood, Brian Kemp, Reg Simerson and Sarah Clough, to name just a few who I know would relish this once-in-a-generation opportunity that we now have to get our country back. We've waited since 1975 for this referendum, and accordingly we must take every effort together to win the day. Already the Stay campaign have given their misguided opinion that the UK is somehow unable to not only survive but also prosper independently, free from the shackles placed upon us by our EU membership. Such an opinion is completely and deliberately neglecting the many strong advantages that we have on the wider global stage, be it as a permanent member of the UN Security Council or alongside our position as a leading member of many other important international organisations. They ignore the fact that the world is a far larger place than the 28 member states that currently make up the EU, and this short-sightedness would prevent us from fulfilling our true potential as a genuine global trading nation. Even though I'm just 5'5", I'm not a little Englander. And I can tell you another thing, I'm certainly not a little European. What I am, though, is someone who is proud to declare their admiration and love for an organisation that accounts for 15% of the world's trade and 25% of the world's population. An organisation which shares a common history, legal system and business practices, speaking the truly international language of English. An organisation that by its geography is far more diverse than the European Union could ever dream to be, and has a truly global reach across every continent on our planet. That organisation is, of course, the Commonwealth, and I, Conference, believe that is our true destiny. Over the past 70 years, in many people's lifetime, the UK ceded control of the largest empire in the history of mankind, granting independence to many countries, but afterwards came together as a Commonwealth of Nations. So now, it seems somewhat ironic that it is us who seek to regain our own independence, now from the European Union. Today's UK is a far different country from that when we joined the EEC back in 1973. The assimilation of British people whose family heritage hails from many different Commonwealth nations, I would argue, places us at a huge advantage by being able to build on the family networks and business links that already exist, giving us an incredible head start as we once again reach out into the exciting wider world. Such a move directly contradicts our opponent's accusation of sentimentality. Indeed, after 42 years membership, it's my belief that it's a Stay camp who are being sentimental by surrounding themselves in the false promises of the European Union. With our Commonwealth partners, we share deeply important historical, political and cultural ties. We are humble and proud of the unquestionable bravery and sacrifice made by the Anzacs at Gallipoli, the Indians at Neuve Chapelle, the Canadians at Vimy Ridge, and the South Africans at Delville Wood, who not only helped us defeat tyranny twice in the last century, they also helped to turn Britain into a great nation. This shared history of grief and triumph gives us a special global kinship that is second to none. It is a national scandal that our political leaders have consistently let it be forsaken in the push for a European superstate. To this day, Commonwealth citizens living in the UK not only enjoy the votes, but many also serve in our armed and civilian forces, and not just from the larger nations. Fiji, for one, has a proud record of producing some of our finest service personnel in recent years. In 2004, Johnson Bahari, who hails from the small Caribbean island of Grenada, the Spice Island, was awarded the UK's first Victoria Cross in 22 years for valour while serving with the British Army in Iraq. The effect that Britain's EU membership had on some Commonwealth nations are well known, not least the impact on Caribbean producers of sugar and bananas. And we will shortly hear, in a similar vein, from our next speaker, Rashida, about the negative impact that the EU has had in West Africa and Ghana in particular. So it's not just the UK that suffers. Our future prosperity is dependent on making every available use of every available network to penetrate deep into the giant and rising markets of Asia, Africa and Latin America. The best network that we have to hand to assist us with this aim is a ready-made Commonwealth network, reinvigorated in an age of almost total connectivity and interactivity, with a common working language, as I've said, and embracing a dozen or more of the world's fastest growing economies and providing a gateway to still more of the great emerging markets of the 21st century. This is, of course, the opposite of what we were told 40 years ago. Then the received wisdom was that Britain's global interests were finished. The Commonwealth could be abandoned like some embarrassing relative, and our destiny lay in a wholehearted participation in the then so-called common market. But today we are on the other side of the internet revolution, and an entirely new pattern of power and markets has been created. The wheel of economic fortune has turned full circle, and it is now outside the EU where all the growth for the next 2 decades is likely to occur, and where much of the wealth is going to be generated to finance the capital projects the world needs, including those in the debt-ridden West. On best estimates, the EU's share of global GDP is set to shrink whilst other areas expand. The Eurozone's share could be as little as 11.9% according to the IMF, whilst Commonwealth countries are projected to grow over the next 5 years alone by 7.2%. Of course, the modern Commonwealth has no specific trade track. That would have mattered 20 years ago, but today not only are the trade barriers far lower or negligible, but trade flows are taking completely different shape with complex supply chains snaking through economies on several continents. Trade now follows not the flag, but the relationship built up, layer upon layer, by soft power diplomacy and deployment. Countries don't trade with countries. It's companies that trade with companies. It should be no surprise that some of the biggest leaps in UK exports have been to Commonwealth countries. 33% to India, 31% to South Africa, 30% to Australia, and 18% to Canada. For the UK, the dice could truly have landed the right way up. The genius of the Commonwealth is that it is people-driven, civic society-driven, common interest-driven, and increasingly market and business-driven. That is why the age of hyper-connectivity has acted like a blood transfusion to a network covering almost a third of humankind. The transformed international scene is now filling up with new networks and alliances, some involving the Old West and some excluding it altogether. The Commonwealth is only one of these new or renewed systems. But, ladies and gentlemen, it is a mighty one, and for a heavily interdependent Britain, it is a huge potential asset in every respect, both from the trade and business point of view, and also from the point of view of our contribution to peace, stability and development. An organisation that promotes shared values, culture, history and interests can be the catalyst for wealth creation, thus transforming the third world on the road out of poverty and dependability on aid, and without the need for the unwieldy political superstructures at a time that recent technological innovations have made the world a far smaller place than it was when the EU was formed. In 2013, Commonwealth members combined total exports of goods and services to all countries stood at $3.4 trillion. This is estimated to be 14% of world exports. Both the UK and the Commonwealth can benefit from British independence from the EU. The natural flexibility afforded to Commonwealth members is a refreshing contrast to the rigid and over-regulated burden that is a consequence of our membership of the European Union. Tacitus must have foreseen the EU all those years ago when he said, "The more corrupt the state, the more numerous the laws." This natural flexibility amongst friends, both old and new, including recent members such as Mozambique and Rwanda, who, despite having no historical ties to any Commonwealth nations, underline how this modern and increasingly evolving organisation isn't some perverse throwback in history. The time, ladies and gentlemen, has come to decide on our fate. It's only right and natural that we look beyond the EU and take a global approach alongside our Commonwealth family. I believe that the world is our oyster, but inside the EU, our future is a clam. And we must take every opportunity to remind the British people that the Commonwealth, who we all identify with so naturally, is the valuable pearl inside that oyster. Thank you.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.